The O Cannabis Conference and Expo returns to Toronto June 1st through the 3rd, and there's still some good booth locations available. This exciting event is free for cannabis retailers and will feature Tommy Chong receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award at the O Cannabis Industry Awards. For more information about exhibiting or to register to attend, go to ocannabis.com. That's OCANNABIZ.com.
All right, today we're going to do a pitch deck review for a Peruvian cannabis cultivation, I believe. I guess we'll find out. So we're going to go through the 7 tips to a successful investment deck. You have to stay tuned through the rest. Welcome back to the Talking Hedge. I'm Josh Kincaid, capital markets analyst and host of your cannabis business podcast. To help us with this Peruvian growing pitch deck or whatever it might be is Katrina Glogowski, angel investor and attorney. Thanks for being back with us.
Thanks, Josh.
So the 7 tips to a successful investment deck is: 1, do they identify the business plan goals? 2 is, do they know their audience? 3, do they understand the market? 4 is if they've identified needs and roadblocks. 5 is, do they know what sets the business apart? Number 6 is, have they introduced the team and products? And 7, have they created a summary? So with that, let's jump right into Can Farm. Can Farm, I think, is in Peru, down in South America. So we'll see what they got going on for us. There is a rare growth potential. Recent and expedited future legalization represents a sudden unlocking of growth and innovation opportunities that's rare in both its initial size and dramatic growth potential. Vast applications. So cannabis has the potential to be used in a wide variety of applications. And then uncommon competitive barriers. Companies that embrace engineering principles, invest in intellectual property, and leverage foundational scientific data will be long-term winners in the cannabis industry. All right, so not really about the business plan itself. This is like in general the applications of cannabis and competitive advantages that cannabis has and potential that cannabis has. So nothing that really is specific to this deck yet. So they go on to say, what makes Canna Farm special? They have a market-oriented strategy. So as a licensed cannabis importer and wholesaler in Peru, they're generating cannabis-related revenues since 2020 while developing commercial and distribution networks, both domestic and international. So that's good. I had no idea Peru was importing cannabis. I had just assumed that they didn't have a license and this was a pre-money play. It looks like they're already generating some revenue.
So, I like the fact that they have a license, yay. But also assuming that this photograph is of their actual facility, they have a building, they got lots. They're pretty far down the road, and I like as an investor to see that. We're not funding an idea, we're funding a business, and this is very encouraging, Josh.
Yeah, at first I thought it was a rendering because it looked like a drawing, but that might be a real photo.
Well, I see people on the street, so that's good.
Yeah. So they're going to have an acceleration phase. Their pharma grade manufacturing facility is going to contribute to their business next year. And they're going to hold cannabis cultivation and manufacturing licenses in Colombia and expect to receive one in Peru in the near future. So it looks like they're trying to go for GMP licensed facilities. It's kind of the global standard. And the timing of it all, they're going to be ready to expand their production capacity in time with the expansion of the cannabis market. Pretty general. 90% of the cost advantage. So Canna Farm, they've got the lowest production cost for cannabis since it enjoys the best location on earth.
If they are lower than Colombia, that is huge.
Yeah, I was going to make this same comment. If they can compete against, either Venezuela or Colombia, even Argentina, if their terroir is equal and the sun and everything and the labor costs are lower, then they'll be doing pretty well, depending on the government and the politics behind it all. Because we did see a lot of the Canadian LPs pull out of Colombia for whatever reason. That's still not clear to me why they've done that. Well, I guess we'll find out eventually. So they've got a risk reward profile looking at unique investor proposition, offering a debt-like risk coupled with an equity upside. So with that, there's a $2.5 million loan with a promissory note as 3% interest, a 5-year maturity term, and a warrant to purchase Canafarm holding shares with a 20% of loan. I'm guessing that's the 20% discount.
I would say that would be a discount, yes.
So up to 500,000 at a valuation of 12.5 million.
That's not horrible, Josh. It's not $2.5 million for 1% of a company. So far, so good. Yay on the Peruvians. They're ticking some boxes here, Josh.
Valuation is decent. Interest rate is low from what we've seen, but you're not really going to get any percent anywhere else. And so, like, again, we'll just kind of have to see what all is included, assuming they have licenses and maybe some patents or trademarks or something. They've got some photos of what looks like some labs. Looks very clean.
Yeah.
So what are the risks? They say that there's a loss of investment in case Canafarm is not successful. Venture debt investors could lose their money. That's with anything. Canafarm venture debt investors benefit of debt-like risks since they have seniority over Series A and founders investors, which is good. That means
That is good.
the founders aren't immediately vested, so that's nice. And covered by fixed assets. So but property, plant, and equipment. So all normal. There's regulatory risks. So Peruvian authorities might revert the regulatory framework and go back to prohibition. It's very unlikely that it could happen since the Peruvian Health Department has already approved the sanitary register for several cannabis products, and cannabis products are already being sold through private pharmacies, including Canafarm's cannabis products. And they hold both a cultivation license and a manufacturing in Colombia as backup. So that's nice.
Yeah.
So it looks like they're able to produce and export a lot more than they expected, holding that import and distribution license and deploying an initial business as an importer and wholesaler of cannabis health products, generating cannabis-related revenue. And they have extensive experience with their founders running agricultural operations. They're saying that it's efficient and cash burn rate is a lot lower than any other cannabis company.
It's nice that they are at least considering cost of goods sold, Josh. Hopefully they provide us with some numbers to establish that. But so far, so good. I'm actually kind of impressed with this.
Yeah, so far so good. There's some technical risks, so they might be unable to properly manage the cannabis crop. So looking at even with the extensive experience and ability to manage agriculture, they have just unsure of, I don't know, hurricanes or whatever. So there's a strong innovative approach through their agroscience division, a part of technology, and looking at high yielding genetics. And they have been awarded several national R&D competitive grants for innovative projects in Latin America and the US. And founders have combined experience of efficiently managing over 1,000 hectares of 6 different crops under organic and biodynamic practices and performing ag consulting services in 30 countries over the last 25 years.
This is something an investor likes to see. Hopefully they give us some names so that we can confirm these statements.
Right. Market risk, there could be an oversupply in some countries. Limited access to global markets could reduce global sales volume. 2020 production will be oriented to the local market where they already have commercial activity, and Canafarm's project is designed for scaling up projection and expanding production of only 2.5 hectares in 2022. So they're going to produce an organic pharma-grade cannabis and then look at price pressures, reducing their price. So due to their unique strategic location, their production costs will be the lowest in the industry to deal with those price pressures, and indicating that their production costs will be 1/10 that of Canadian companies.
Josh, I'm really happy that they did this slide. I think this slide is a little dense, but I am happy to see it because these are often the criticisms that you and I raise. Cost of goods sold, what happens when you can't sell your pot for $250 a gram? It sounds to me like these people are on top of it, and it's very encouraging.
Yeah, and if they can grow for 63 cents per gram to Canada's $6.30, that's going to be a huge, huge hurdle that the Canadian marketplace will not be able to overcome. They just can't compete at that level. So, if this is the case and they are able to grow as much or more than Canada, then those LPs and their stock price are in trouble.
Right.
So that's the end of this particular deck. So not a whole lot there. Now I did receive a couple other slides and maybe we'll just briefly just look at those. It talks about market orientation and timing, venture debt opportunity, competitive advantages. Talks a little bit about Peru and continuous innovation. It talks about Shared X, an impact agricultural company that farms over 1,000 hectares of organic certified crops, named one of the top 100 global impact companies. And they're going to enjoy, Canafarm will enjoy multiple benefits from Shared X's authentic impact orientation. Also being a leading agricultural consulting firm that's participated in over 500 projects in over 30 countries in the last 20 years. That could be like in the addendum at the very bottom of a pitch deck. And then they give us a cannabis Peruvian regulation summary talking about the scope and the definitions.
Okay, their licensing structure seems similar to what we've seen before, breaking it down. Uh, Looks like it's medical cannabis. Okay. So that's all we got from them was these three things.
Yeah, the regulation summary could be at the very bottom of the deck, as well as this one page PDF, whatever this is supposed to be. But yeah, it looks like it's a good start. It's got me intrigued. I never looked at Peru as a international logistical location for cannabis, but I mean Peru makes a lot of stuff. I think they have coffee and other agricultural crops that they send out to the world.
Yeah. Well, let's go through the 7 tips, Josh.
All right, so let's take a look at the 7 tips to a successful investment deck for this Peruvian cultivator, import exporter, and ask if they've identified their business plan goals.
I think they did. They said we need some money, and this is why we need some money. And little skimpy on details, but they did have a goal.
Yeah, very simple goal of wanting to get more money to expand. And what about knowing their audience? Do they understand the investor?
They used buzzwords that the investor likes, especially in their ask. They had very specific details in their ask with the warrants and the promissory note rate and the valuation. They also used a lot of buzzwords throughout their pitch deck. Somebody definitely put some thought into this as far as addressing the cost of goods sold, how they're going to be competitive, why they're going to be competitive. So yeah, I'm going to say they did a pretty good job.
I would also give them a full point because, again, understanding investor audience means giving a proper valuation, which they did, and giving enough, risks, which we'll get to in number 4 with identifying needs and roadblocks. But I think they put in enough caveats as well as keeping that valuation reasonable. So number 3, do they understand the market?
They did not talk about their retail distribution network or retail sales, which is what they're currently doing, or even wholesale sales. Um, but they did talk about the market for cultivation and the desperation of a cannabis company to keep their costs low enough. And they primarily addressed this by comparing themselves to Canada and being aware of the issue. There were some broad statements. We're going to be the cheapest in the world without some backup. So I'm going to give them a half a point there, Josh, only because what they did, their understanding of the market was proscriptive as far as uh, uh, their grow operation that is not currently working, as opposed to their current retail operation.
I would have liked to known a little bit more about the local market rather than just saying we have Colombia as a backup. It's not going to give investors peace of mind knowing that they're going to invest in Peru. And if it fails, well, we could just start all over again in another country. So I'd want to know a little bit more about local competition and maybe a little bit more about some of the regulatory framework and what they're doing to expand their distribution and network in Peru rather than just saying, don't worry, we've got a backup plan if we have to leave the country. So I would
Right.
also probably go with a half a point on understanding the market. I think they do understand the market, but I don't think the deck necessarily reflects that. So moving on to number 4, I really liked how they had a ton of needs and roadblocks, whether that was regulation or some kind of force majeure or hurricane or whatever. They didn't say that specifically. They just said there could be issues not getting the proper yield. So maybe elaborating on what that means. Um, because there are certain issues, right? If you're too coastal or hurricane zone or whatever else. But they did dive into regulatory issues and the fact that it's fairly new, and any kind of nuanced, highly regulated commodity like cannabis is going to have its issues. So maybe just kind of elaborating on that would have been helpful.
I agree with everything you just said, Josh.
So do they know what sets the business apart?
This is where I think they start to struggle. And they did. They said, "Hey, we're going to be the cheapest cannabis in Peru," and that's a nice statement. But there was no supporting documentation, no supporting facts and figures to back up that statement. And this is an opportunity for them to improve. And they went through and listed, 9, I think, risks of this investment, which are important and they need to be there. Uh, but there wasn't a lot of context. They are asking for US money, which implies a US investor who, quite frankly, has probably never been to Peru and is unfamiliar with the regulations, rules, market of Peru. And, if I just Googled Peruvian cannabis, what language is it going to be in? Am I going to understand it? So they missed an opportunity there. And so I can't give them a point for 5 there, knowing what sets your business apart. And there was absolutely no information about competition.
Yeah, I would agree that it would have been more beneficial for them to show, a little bit more about how they're setting themselves apart from Colombia. What would make a Canadian cultivator or LP want to come into Peru since they left Colombia? Why are you different than Canada? Is it the terroir or is it just lower, cheaper labor? Because if that's all it is, why would they come to Peru when they left Colombia? So again, I would say, why is this company different than the other decks we get out of Latin America? And why are you different and or better than Canada? If an investor is going to go to North America, uh, why should they look at you in South America?
And prepare to fall out of your chair here, Josh. Uh, Where's the total addressable market slide? Oh my gosh. And it's only because of their audience. They're again seeking US money. And I have no idea what were cannabis sales in Peru last year. I have no idea. None.
Yeah, so while we don't need necessarily the total global addressable market, it would be nice to know, how many medical patients are there in Peru? How many rec uh, avenues do they have for stores? Is it medical? Is it recreational stores? What's the distribution look like? What are your sales? Who's buying? Some data would be helpful. We don't need to know, the billions of dollars that are being sold worldwide. Just for this marketplace would have been nice. And it would have been nice to know who are the experts behind this, 30 countries and 25 years experience and all of that. That's great. A lot of these decks will lead to investment based on the individuals that are participating in it, not necessarily the idea alone. And so that's why it's so important to include who your team is. A bio, a picture, showing who the folks are is important for any investor.
Uh, Absolutely. If I want to go down the road with this investment, I need to know who I'm dealing with. And it is especially important in this deck because they are relying on the expertise that these individuals have as one of their competitive advantages. And if you're going to say we have the best team in the universe, you had better be able to back that up. And so I think that's a shortfalling there, as well as what their product is. We see that they're already selling. We didn't have any numbers or facts or figures about that, but they did say that they're already selling. And God forbid something goes sideways and they can't grow, they can still sell. Okay, that is great. Investors love that. Now tell me, what are you selling?
Yeah,
How much are you selling?
they told us the brand, but they didn't mention any of the products. So if you're selling infused, coffee beans or chocolate flavored or chocolate covered raisins or just some obscure product that nobody's buying right now, then that would be an issue. But since you didn't mention what you're selling, you're kind of leaving us in the dark a little bit. So don't be afraid to introduce the team and products. So can't give you a point there.
I would say whoever put this deck together knows what they're doing. They use the right words, they hit the right boxes. They just need to flesh it out a little bit. Maybe they were just trying to see if they could get a bite before they gave away too many of the secret sauce. But there's just not enough here for me to bite on. And that would be a room for improvement for them, is just to flesh out some of that team and product. Just that alone would really help them.
And then did they create a summary with the call to action?
They gave us the ask. They gave us the terms of the ask. I think there was a telephone number and a website to contact, which isn't always present, so that's good. But I was not compelled to call.
Okay. So I think that if we bump that up to a 4, that's 57%. 4 out of 7 leads. It's not too shabby, but in order to get to 100%. Now a lot of these decks are they don't have everything involved because the individual is probably expecting Q&A, or they ad lib the rest of it, or they have their team with them and introduce them on the stage. And so there's not always that opportunity when it's just you and I doing it for them. But if they did want to get 100%, they would have to talk a little bit more about the market in Peru. They'd have to have a little bit more information about what sets them apart, specifically, comparing Colombia and Canada. Obviously, having a slide for the team and whatever products they have, and then maybe a little call to action at the bottom. Leave those numbers with the ask what you want, and kind of create some buzz there, because this is when you say that you're going to be 1/10 of what Canada's doing, that's enough for a lot of people to stop and ask more questions. And I would capitalize on that a little bit more.
I would also focus a little bit, Josh, on the import export. I think that they could do this in one slide, and just say, hey, we have a friendly relationship or a subsidiary business in Colombia. We have the license to get it across the border, and it's an additional revenue stream. And I have to tell you, as a potential investor, the most important thing to me is that import export license, and that is a big differentiator. From my background, I don't know, maybe everybody in Peru can import and export, and it's no special big deal. But as you know, here in the U.S., import is and export is prohibited, and even in Canada, they're struggling with import and export. So if these individuals have import export down a license, they're doing it, they're operational. That would be very interesting to me.
Yeah, and there's other opportunities too. They could import hemp biomass and produce a lot of, more rare cannabinoids, CBL, CBG, CBN, and export that to the European market. And they didn't even cover any of that. Don't know if it's an opportunity, but I do know that Brazil is right next to them and they produce a lot of hemp. And so maybe there's that, option to do that as well. So that kind of goes back to what sets them apart. And what products are they making? Are there any CBD options in there? Because that could help get a lot of product to the U.S., whereas they don't allow for cannabis imports yet, but they could with CBD or other hemp-derived cannabinoids.
And I'd like to close, Josh, by saying that this is the best international pitch deck that we have seen.
Yeah, I think I would second that. There has been some really scary ones that we've come across. This one, I think, is a really good start. I think they've got a lot of amazing things in there, like 1/10 of the cost of Canada. I would have not assumed that. We talk a lot about Colombia, never mentioned Peru though until now. So with the help of this deck, definitely kind of opened my eyes to other opportunities in South America. I'll be diving into this a little bit more, but there's not enough there to pull out a checkbook quite yet. All right. I want to thank my guest, Katrina Glugowski, angel investor and attorney. Thanks for diving into this pitch deck for Peru cultivation facility and giving 7 tips to a successful investment deck.
Thanks, Josh.
With that, we're going to roll this one up. I'm Josh Kincaid. This is the Talking Hedge. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't, and I'm out.
How do cannabis CEOs balance growth and optimization strategies? What is THCO, Delta-10, and CBNA, and why should you care about these minor cannabinoids? And why isn't the endocannabinoid system covered in medical school? Most people think they're up to date in trends in the cannabis industry, but they're about 6 weeks behind. Learn about what is truly next in the cannabis space by joining myself, Brian Fields, and Kellen Finney every week on the Dime Podcast, and of course, on PodConnects.